Chapter -37, Remembering Heaven. Skye, writing in red ink for all the dawns and all the sunsets and for the colour of my hair and Miguel's. At the end of our first set of adventures recorded in the Time Virus, we went to heaven. Ezekiel took us there in a chariot that flew and floated and did the most amazing things. We went to heaven on the same day that Minnow and I both turned 11, the 11th of the 11th. On that day we found out that you don't have to die to go to heaven. Who knew? When we got there, Ben and I were excited to see our parents again, fully alive. I think the word heaven must actually mean never-ending life, not a place after death, although Frank prefers to call it the wide blue yonder because of his obsession with blue. When we were in heaven, I needed to be put back together again because, like Humpty Dumpty, I'd been broken into pieces by the trauma in my life. The splintering first started to happen when I was in the deepest of sleeps after an evil time virus arranged for my father to die. All of this was in another lifetime, a parallel life that was corrupted by the time virus. While Ben and I were in that life, Dad died when I was 10 years old and Ben was 11. During the car accident that killed Dad, I was injured and went into a coma. When I woke up, I was shocked to find some of my younger selves with me. The 6-year-old wanted to be called Six, with 2 X's, and my 4-year-old self loved the name Jemima. They were as real as they would have been if they were my little sisters. They had bodies and minds, and they were often very naughty. They were invisible to everyone unless I wanted them to be seen. Still, it was very hard to keep them secret because they were really young and loved being noisy and having fun. But I needed to keep them a secret so they'd be safe. Because our mother had died when we were young, after our dad died, my brother and I were forced to live in an orphanage run by a nasty school principal. She hated us. Her name was Isla, Thieve, and she was married to Overlord Thieve, a failed church leader who wasn't qualified to teach anything, but he taught at our school anyway. The Thieves were incredibly mean, and after a while we realised that they were not only nasty but fully evil. They actually wanted to kill me. Being all splintered apart, I began to feel weaker and weaker. Fairly soon I found it hard to go on. A little baby part of me even splintered away, and we called her Moat. She was so cute, but being all broken apart was hard for all of us. After a while, we realised that if we weren't put together again, we might all die. Luckily, I met Sir Stella Walker, the captain of a pirate ship, and my future self. It was such an incredible time. Stella captured the thieves with the help of some wild and wonderful time fairies. No wonder the Overlord and Isla wanted to kill me. They knew I'd be their undoing when I grew up. And I still plan to be their undoing, even though I'm only 11 as I write this part of our story. Anyway, back to the day that Minnow and I turned 11. After we'd been in heaven for a while, it was finally time to put all my selves back into the same body. Before I realised what was happening, Stella, Six and Jem had merged with little baby Moat. And somehow, I don't know how I knew to do it, but at exactly the right moment, I transformed myself into a sea eagle before dive-bombing the basket in which my tiny self lay. I suddenly became that baby. It was really weird seeing the universe through that baby's eyes and thinking about all of our adventures with her wildly open baby brain. That little girl was excited about being alive. I remember that so clearly. It was as if everything had become magic. The wind on my little cheeks and the sound of the ocean, which was like 1,000,000,000 orchestras to my baby brain. While I was mote, a simple bird's song became a message from all the angels in the universe, and my parents hugging me. Well, that felt like being massaged by hundreds of thousands of fairies. I remember Mum and Dad holding me for the longest time while everyone sat in the heavenly afternoon sun, eating and drinking and telling stories. At the end of the day, just as the moon was about to rise, Ezekiel returned to heaven to collect us in his chariot. When he asked if we'd enjoyed our stay, we all beamed from ear to ear. Of course we said that the day had been stunning, wonderful, beyond belief, exceptional. Ezekiel simply nodded and smiled at each one of us before gesturing towards his chariot by way of asking us to join him in a return journey to Marescimar. I heard Ben say, "Thank you," as he carried me onto the chariot in my little cradle. Ben looked so proud. Everyone waved goodbye to Athena, Mum and Dad, and they waved back, promising that they'd see us again soon back on Van Diemen's Island. Van Diemen's Island is where Frank and Minnow live. Mum and Dad seemed to think that now that Stella had conquered the power of the time virus on our family, Ben and I would no longer be orphans when we returned to Van Diemen's Island. In my baby state, I couldn't quite remember being at the orphanage with the thieves. I sort of knew that Ben and I had been living somewhere terrible, but I didn't really know exactly where that had been. I felt proud that Stella had rescued our family. And remember, Stella is me, all grown up. So it was really me who'd saved our family. I think my baby self knew all about that, and she felt strangely proud in her little heart. After all the farewells, Ezekiel took us back to Marescimar. On the way, I was transformed from a baby back into my 11-year-old self, but this time I was an 11-year-old who'd lived a really lucky and wildly exciting life. It was incredible to feel so much happiness all at once after so much sorrow. Ben felt it too. He said it was really weird at first, but after a while he stopped resisting the new feeling. As we travelled along in that chariot, all the nastiness of living with the thieves and all the sadness of losing our parents just faded away. It's hard to describe exactly how it happened. While Ezekiel's chariot was travelling, I felt myself relive all my childhood years up to the age of 11. It was like one long dream, but without any of the tragedy that the time virus had forced onto our family. It was as if my brain was being filled with what had really happened in my life, without the influence of the thieves. Blizzard explained later that without the time virus, my family had become completely free to enjoy life. In the chariot, I felt as if I was lying really still, and time was passing through and over and under me like a river, except that it wasn't wet. Every part of my body and my mind was filled with an enormous peace, which also found its way into my soul. And then, when the dream ended, we were back at Marescimar. Ezekiel had parked his chariot on the sand very near the massive cottonwood tree that overlooks the beach, and there it was, the delicious smell of the Marescimar beach. Vanilla, nutmeg, cinnamon and cardamom in the sand. Yum, just like Christmas cake, the one Athena always makes.